The galaxy had known nothing but war for centuries. Alien races, once rivals, now stood united, believing they had achieved peace. The last great battle had ended, and the final remnants of the ancient enemy had been crushed. The Galactic Council, made up of representatives from every known species, had declared victory. For the first time in generations, the stars were silent. Peace was within reach. The Council celebrated the victory as a turning point. Messages of hope spread across the galaxy, telling stories of the great heroes who had fought for freedom. Alien species, from the mighty Zargans to the peaceful Velter, now worked side by side to rebuild. For the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. But little did they know, this peace was about to be shattered by something unexpected. A strange signal began to spread across the galaxy. It was faint at first, hardly noticeable. But as weeks passed, it grew stronger, more distinct. The signal came from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a place no one had ventured in centuries. The Council, still basking in their victory, initially brushed it off. They believed they had rid the galaxy of all potential threats. The old enemies were gone, after all. What harm could possibly come from such a distant corner of the universe? But the signal was persistent, like a whisper in the dark. A warning, though no one knew it yet. On a remote monitoring station, deep within the outer rim, a young technician named Roller first picked up the signal. At first, he thought it was a glitch. But as he analyzed it further, his heart sank. It wasn't just any signal. It was a distress call, but not from any known species. The transmission was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. He quickly reported his findings to the higher-ups, but his concerns were dismissed as nothing more than a technical error. Weeks passed, and the signal continued. Then, the unthinkable happened. A ship appeared, moving silently toward the heart of the galaxy. It was not like any ship the galaxy had seen. Its sleek design and advanced technology were unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. The ship didn't broadcast any identification or message. It simply appeared, as if it had always been there, waiting. The Council finally took notice. At first, the leaders of the galaxy believed it was a scout from one of the remaining alien races, testing their boundaries. But as the ship drew closer, they realized it wasn't a scout. It wasn't even an enemy ship. It was human-made. The humans had arrived. For centuries, Earth had been a forgotten world, isolated in the farthest corner of the universe. But somehow, against all odds, humanity had mastered space travel. They had learned the ways of the stars. And now, they were coming. The Council quickly gathered to discuss the situation. Panic began to spread among the leaders. They had never expected humanity to be capable of such a feat. No one had ever considered that Earth, a small and insignificant planet in the grand scheme of the galaxy, could produce a civilization that was capable of reaching the stars. The human ship, though small compared to the massive fleets of the galaxy, was powerful. Its weapons were primitive, yet effective. And its crew, though inexperienced by galactic standards, was determined. They had survived on a harsh world for centuries, and now they were ready to prove their worth. The message that humanity sent to the Council was simple: we are here to claim what is ours. The galaxy, once united in peace, now found itself divided. Some feared the humans, seeing them as a new threat. Others saw them as a potential ally. But one thing was clear: humanity's arrival was going to change everything. The stars, once silent, now seemed to hold a terrible secret. A new chapter was beginning, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy was still adjusting to the strange presence of humanity when a wave of panic swept across the stars. The Council, still clinging to the illusion of peace, struggled to understand what this new arrival meant. Humanity's message had been clear, but their true intentions remained hidden. Were they here to conquer, to negotiate, or to simply survive? No one could be certain, but what was undeniable was the feeling that the galaxy was no longer in control. The ship that had arrived, called the Vanguard, was nothing like the fleets the galaxy had encountered before. It was small, compact, and seemed almost primitive compared to the majestic starships of the galactic powers. But appearances were deceptive. The Vanguard was sturdy, efficient, and built for survival rather than grandeur. Its weapons, though crude in design, were incredibly powerful. The humans had learned to make the most out of what they had, and that resourcefulness had brought them this far. As the ship neared the center of the galaxy, the Council scrambled to organize a response. A fleet of peacekeepers was dispatched, not to attack, but to make contact, to understand what these humans wanted. It was clear that they couldn't be ignored any longer. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Elias Turner stared out at the vast expanse of space. He had led his crew through countless battles on Earth, and now he was leading them into a war they could not yet fully comprehend. His people had fought for survival on a dying world. They had endured hardships that few could imagine, but that had only made them stronger. They were now a force to be reckoned with. As the human ship moved toward the galactic center, the peacekeeper fleet approached. A message from the Council was broadcast to the Vanguard. "This is the Galactic Peacekeeper Fleet. You have entered sovereign space. Identify yourselves and state your intentions." The humans didn't respond immediately. Instead, they sent a simple signal back: "We are humanity. We've come to claim what is ours." A cold silence hung over the galaxy. This was the moment of truth. The humans had come, but no one knew whether they were allies or enemies. Was this a new beginning or the beginning of the end? Back on the Council's main station, the leaders exchanged nervous glances. They had hoped that the humans would be a small, insignificant species, easily controlled or ignored. But as the days passed and the humans refused to leave, it became clear that humanity was not going anywhere. They were here to stay. What's worse, the humans had made it clear that they expected to be treated as equals. In their messages, they spoke of the importance of freedom and the right to claim their place in the galaxy. The idea that a species that had once been a small, isolated planet in the farthest reaches of the universe could now demand a seat at the table of galactic powers was unthinkable. But the humans' message was not just one of words, it was backed by actions. The Council's leaders attempted to initiate a diplomatic meeting with the humans, but it quickly became apparent that the humans did not care for diplomacy. They were not interested in waiting for permission or approval. Instead, they laid down an ultimatum. "We will not be held back by your treaties and councils," the human representative, Ambassador Sarah Jones, declared in a transmission sent to the galactic leaders. "We have fought for our survival on Earth, and we will fight to claim what we deserve in the stars. You will either join us, or you will be in our way. Choose wisely." The broadcast sent ripples through the galaxy. Some species, particularly those who had fought alongside the humans in the past, began to rally behind them. Others, particularly the older and more established civilizations, reacted with shock and anger. How dare these humans speak to them in such a way? How dare they demand a place among the stars? The tension grew as the days passed. The peacekeeper fleet circled the Vanguard, but they did not engage. The humans had made it clear that they were not interested in fighting unless provoked. Still, many of the galaxy's leaders feared what might happen next. What if the humans were not content to coexist? What if they had ambitions that stretched beyond mere survival? In the quiet of their ships and stations, the leaders of the galaxy made plans for the worst. But in the hearts of those who had fought alongside humanity, there was a growing sense of excitement. Perhaps this was the dawn of a new era. Perhaps the galaxy's old ways were being challenged, and humanity's arrival was the spark that would ignite change. The unknown stretched before them, vast and filled with uncertainty. But one thing was clear: humanity was no longer the forgotten species at the edge of the universe. They had arrived. And the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy was no longer united by peace. The unexpected arrival of humanity had shattered the illusion that the war was over. While some alien species were eager to embrace the newcomers, others were deeply suspicious, fearing that humans might pose a threat to the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve. The tension in the air was palpable, and the future of the galaxy now hung in the balance. As days passed, it became clear that humanity wasn't just interested in diplomacy or alliances. They were not like any other species the galaxy had encountered before. Humans didn't bend the knee, didn't fall into the same patterns of submission that the galactic powers were accustomed to. They had their own way of doing things, a way that had been forged in the fires of a violent, chaotic history. The humans were survivors, and survival meant fighting, even when all seemed lost. In the council chambers, debates raged about the best course of action. Some of the younger species, who had barely survived the last war, were eager to form a strong bond with the humans, hoping that their tenacity would offer the galaxy the strength it needed to prevent further conflict. But the older species, the powerful, long-established civilizations, saw humanity as nothing more than an unpredictable threat, one that could destabilize everything they had worked for. But it wasn't just the political leaders who had started to see humanity as a challenge. The galaxy's elite military forces, trained in centuries of warfare and battle tactics, were beginning to whisper about the humans' rise to power. The human ship, the Vanguard, had made no attempt to disguise its strength. It had shown the galaxy that it was capable of defending itself, and in doing so, it had gained the respect of some, while earning the distrust of others. On Earth, humans had always fought for survival. Whether it was in the age of early wars, where nations clashed over land and power, or in the darkest days of global conflict, humanity had learned how to fight for what they believed was theirs. Now, that same spirit was rising once more. But this time, humanity was not fighting for its survival alone. They were fighting for their place in the stars. On the fringes of Earth's military command, a rebellious faction of humans began to form. They were not content to simply follow orders or wait for the Council's approval. They believed that humanity's time had come, that they had earned the right to claim their place as a dominant force in the galaxy. Led by General Naomi Rivers, a hardened veteran who had fought in countless wars on Earth, the rebellion was not interested in alliances or peace talks. They wanted to reshape the galaxy to fit their vision. Their message was clear: humanity was strong. Humanity would not be silenced. They would claim what was rightfully theirs, regardless of who stood in their way. General Rivers was a figure of legend among the human ranks. She had been born into a world on the brink of collapse, a world where resources were scarce, and survival was uncertain. Her rise to power was fueled by a burning desire to see humanity thrive. Under her leadership, the human rebellion began to gain momentum. They recruited soldiers from every corner of Earth, pulling from those who had survived the harshest conditions, those who understood what it meant to fight for their very existence. Rivers knew that the galaxy's established powers would never accept humanity's rise without resistance. So, she trained her forces, preparing them for a war that might soon come. Her army wasn't large, but they were fierce, skilled, and prepared to use any means necessary to achieve their goals. They understood that in the stars, might often meant right. And humanity had learned how to fight. Back in the heart of the galaxy, the Council was growing more anxious. Rumors of the human rebellion began to spread, and the once dismissed fear of humanity's strength was now a reality that they had to face. The galaxy's largest fleets were put on high alert, and military leaders began to strategize on how to handle the human threat. Some suggested that a preemptive strike might be necessary, while others argued for a more diplomatic approach. But the rebellion wasn't just about military strength, it was about something deeper. It was about humanity's refusal to be controlled, their unwillingness to simply accept their place at the table. For the first time in centuries, a species had appeared that did not play by the rules of the galaxy. The rebellion was not just an army, it was a symbol of defiance, of the human spirit that refused to be broken. As the rebellion grew, it spread beyond Earth. Humanity's message reached other planets, other species, many of whom had suffered under the weight of galactic dominance for centuries. The human strength, their refusal to submit, inspired others to rise. There were whispers of uprisings on the outer worlds, of factions and alliances forming in the shadows, ready to follow humanity's lead. The galaxy, once united by a shared victory, was now divided. The old powers were no longer in control. Humanity had arrived with a force and a will that no one had expected, and they would not be silenced. The first battle between the human rebellion and the galaxy's elite forces was about to begin. The stakes were high. Would humanity be able to secure its place in the stars, or would the galaxy's established powers crush the upstart species before it could rise? In the distance, the stars twinkled silently, as if holding their breath, waiting for the galaxy to decide its future. The fate of the galaxy would no longer be determined by the old powers, it would be decided by humanity's rise or fall. The stars seemed to grow darker with each passing day. The rebellion of humanity was no longer a whisper in the shadows, it had become a roar, echoing across the galaxy. The galaxy's leaders, who had once believed their victory over the old enemies was the beginning of an everlasting peace, now found themselves facing an entirely new and unexpected threat. Humanity had arrived, and they were not interested in peaceful coexistence. They were determined to claim their place at the table, no matter the cost. The Galactic Council, a powerful alliance of the universe's most advanced and respected species, was thrown into disarray. For the first time in centuries, they were faced with a force they could not understand. Humanity, with their fierce resilience and resourcefulness, had caught the galaxy off guard. No one could predict their next move. At the heart of the council, leaders from the Zargans, the Velter, the Neroth, and the Kaldar sat in a tense meeting. They had all lived through countless wars, but nothing had prepared them for what humanity had unleashed. The older civilizations were alarmed, this rebellion was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The human ships, small but powerful, were already moving towards key strategic systems. General Naomi Rivers, the leader of the rebellion, had become a symbol of humanity's unrelenting will to survive. Her actions spoke louder than any words. She was not going to be ignored. "I have never seen anything like this before," High Commander Sorek of the Zargan fleet said, his voice low and heavy with concern. "They are not like us. They don't follow our rules. They fight with something we have lost." "You mean they fight with heart," replied Kalra, the diplomatic envoy from the Velter. "They're not bound by honor codes or treaties. Humanity is a species born of conflict, but they are also born of resolve. And that makes them dangerous." The debate raged for hours, with no clear solution in sight. There was no one in the room who could answer the key question: could the galaxy's greatest fleet stand against humanity's will to dominate? The answer, it seemed, was one they weren't prepared to face. The decision was made: the galaxy's most powerful military forces would be mobilized. But they couldn't just rely on their ships and technology, this would be a war fought on every front, including within the hearts and minds of their people. The galaxy's leadership had to act swiftly. If humanity wasn't crushed quickly, their rebellion would spread like wildfire. The Council's decision was swift: they would confront humanity head-on. They ordered an armada to be assembled, one that would dwarf anything humanity could ever hope to muster. Their fleets would converge on Earth's last known position, the heart of the rebellion. But humanity wasn't waiting for an attack, they were already prepared. General Rivers had anticipated this move. She knew that the galaxy's military would not sit idly by while her forces gained ground. She had been preparing for this moment since the rebellion had begun. Humanity's fleets had grown stronger, more organized, and their weapons had evolved. The humans might not have the numbers of the galaxy's elite forces, but they had the advantage of being underestimated. At the same time, the rebellion wasn't just about military power. It was about ideology. It was about humanity's deep-seated belief that they had the right to exist in the stars, to carve out a future for themselves among the vastness of space. They had fought for survival on their homeworld, a planet once filled with strife and division. Now, they were determined to fight for their place in the galaxy, to prove that they were more than just survivors. They were conquerors. As the galaxy's fleets gathered on the outskirts of Earth's solar system, tensions were high. The first shots fired would set the tone for the entire war. But General Rivers had one last piece of strategy up her sleeve. The human fleet wasn't just going to fight, they were going to make a statement. Rivers had secretly ordered a new weapon, one that had been developed in the depths of Earth's laboratories. It was still untested, but its potential was immense. It was a weapon designed to disrupt the very technology that powered the galaxy's fleets. Humanity had learned from their past mistakes, they had learned to fight smarter, not harder. The countdown to war had begun. The galaxy's armada was just days away from striking, and humanity's ships were poised to defend their newfound place in the stars. The human rebellion had become more than just a political struggle, it had become a symbol of defiance, of hope, and of an unbreakable spirit. The galaxy's greatest powers were about to face a force they could not predict or control. The first clash was inevitable. Humanity was no longer the insignificant species they had once been. They were ready. And the galaxy would never be the same. The battle did not begin with a loud explosion. It began with silence. Across the dark space near Earth, thousands of ships faced each other. On one side, the galaxy's greatest armada, massive, shining, and full of power built over centuries. On the other side, the human fleet, smaller, rough, and built for survival. It looked like an easy victory for the galaxy. But looks had always been deceiving. General Naomi Rivers stood on the command deck of the human flagship. Her eyes were calm, but her mind was sharp. She knew this moment would decide everything. Not just for Earth, but for the future of the entire galaxy. "Hold position," she said quietly. Around her, human officers waited. No fear. No panic. Just focus. The alien fleet sent one final message. Surrender now. This is your last chance. Rivers did not even smile. Send reply, she said. A single message went out across space. We survived worse. Then, everything changed. Before the galaxy could fire the first shot, human ships moved. Not forward, but sideways. Fast. Unpredictable. Breaking every known battle formation. The alien commanders were confused. This was not how wars were fought. Then the human weapon activated. A strange pulse spread through space. It was invisible, but its effect was immediate. The advanced alien ships began to flicker. Their systems slowed. Weapons failed. Shields weakened. Panic spread through the armada. What is happening? Our systems are not responding. They are shutting us down. Humanity had not tried to match the galaxy's strength. They had targeted its weakness. Within seconds, the balance of power shifted. Now, Rivers said. Human ships attacked. Fast. Direct. Precise. They did not waste energy. They did not aim to scare. They aimed to win. Explosions lit up the darkness. Large alien ships, once seen as unstoppable, began to fall. Not because they were weak, but because they were unprepared. They had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that adapted. An enemy that did not follow rules. An enemy that refused to lose. The battle spread across space. Smaller alien ships tried to escape. Others tried to regroup. But human fighters were already there, cutting through them with speed and control. On the alien command ship, High Commander Sorek watched in shock. This is impossible, he whispered. But it was not impossible. It was human. Hours passed, but for those in the battle, it felt like minutes. The galaxy's greatest armada, once full of pride and confidence, was now broken and scattered. And still, humanity did not stop. Finally, the remaining alien leaders sent a signal. Not of war. But of surrender. The message reached General Rivers. We yield. For a moment, the battlefield went quiet again. Rivers looked at the stars. The same stars that had once felt so far away. The same stars that had once ignored Earth. Now they were watching. "Cease fire," she ordered. Human ships slowly powered down their weapons. The war was over. But this time, humanity had won. Days later, the Galactic Council gathered again. But this meeting was different. There was no celebration. No pride. Only silence. And at the center of it all stood a human. General Naomi Rivers. No longer just a soldier. Now, a symbol. A new voice in the galaxy. "You thought the war was over," she said calmly. "You were wrong. You just didn't know who was coming next." No one spoke. Because deep down, they all understood. Humanity had not come to destroy the galaxy. They had come to change it. Not with perfect systems. Not with ancient rules. But with something stronger. Will. From that day forward, the galaxy entered a new era. Some species joined humanity, seeing strength in their spirit. Others stayed distant, still afraid. But none could deny the truth anymore. Humans were no longer outsiders. They were leaders. The balance of power had shifted forever. And somewhere, far from the council, a young human looked up at the stars with a quiet smile. Because for the first time, the galaxy did not feel unreachable. It felt like home. The galaxy thought the war was over. But it had only just begun to understand humanity.